Hello, everyone. As introduced, I'm Dr. Mubin Syed. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been doing some research on South Asian health. I'm actually a physician practicing in the United States. So today I'm going to talk about your health. When you look into the mirror, you may see a healthy person looking back at you. But if you look closer, you may see your history, a history of survival. Our ancestors survived multiple widespread famines throughout South Asia during the near two-century colonial period. In fact, from 1757 to 1947, there were 36 major famines. The worst period was during the latter half of the 19th century, when there was a famine just about every other year. This compares to the 2,000 years prior to colonialism, when there was only 17 major famines in 2,000 years, and only one major famine since the end of the colonial period. Even during non-famine years, there was major food deprivation in South Asia. This accelerated during the latter part of the colonial period, such that there was a 30% decline in food grain availability per person between 1909 to 1946. As a result of these hardships, this claimed the lives of more than 160 million South Asians between 1880 to 1920 alone. This is a map of South Asia, and you can see that the famines involved almost all areas of South Asia. Yet many people of South Asian origin are completely unaware of that the famines that occurred in their own ancestral regions. Even the insert history books don't talk about the full effect and history of the famines. Instead, we learn about the so-called progress in the colonial period, the railroads, the English language, etc. But the truth is much darker. It has been documented that there was enough food to feed everyone in South Asia during this period. But the food was kept from the people. Colonizers systematically and drastically altered the economic focus and food distribution in the country. Food produced in South Asia was exported throughout the rest of the world. Billions of pounds of food was transported from the inland areas to the port cities and from there to the rest of the world for colonizer profit, even during the famines. In effect, the famines were man-made. Colonizers impoverished and starved the masses. I know these are horrific images to see. It has been debated whether it was inhumane for the British photographer to ask these suffering people to take these photos. But he was a rare individual trying to document these tragedies. And these photos are rare evidence. Before the domination of the British East India Company, South Asia accounted for 25% of the world's industrial output, similar to the United States today. But by 1900, it accounted for less than 2%. The British crushed the economic powerhouse that was South Asia and extracted $66 trillion of wealth from South Asia during this period. Poverty rates skyrocketed, so much so that life expectancy plummeted to as low as 22 years of age. I tell you this not to dwell on our shocking and tragic past, but to reveal how it has led to a modern health crisis in South Asians throughout the world. South Asians today have one of the highest, if not the highest, rates of diabetes and heart disease in the world. In fact, India is known as the diabetes capital of the world. South Asians account for 25% of the world's population, but also account for more than 60% of the global cardiovascular disease burden. So what's the connection with our colonial past? It is thought that millions of South Asians, generation after generation, adapted to conditions with little or no food or extended periods of time like that. Yet in modern times, many wealthy and middle-class South Asians have access to abundant food and have had drastic alterations in lifestyle. It is this, adapted genetics to famine, yet not living in conditions of malnourishment, that connects the past to the modern health crisis. To combat this, we have to be aware of this. Researchers and even politicians are spotlighting the startling statistics of South Asian health. But most of us, and even physicians, are unaware of our own predispositions until there's a crisis. Unaware myself, I actually had a massive heart attack at age 52, even though I was healthy by Western medicine standards. I was the right weight, I exercised regularly, and I thought I was eating a healthy diet. Later, I learned there needs to be a different standard of health for South Asians. By these differing standards, I was actually obese, I was exercising only a fraction of what I needed to do, and I was eating too much of the wrong foods. Let's look at an example of how South Asian bodies differ from that of Europeans. This is Dr. Yudkin, a white European, and Dr. Yajnik, a South Asian. Both are middle-aged males. BMI is described here, which stands for body mass index. That's equal to weight divided by height squared. And it's a measure that's used by physicians and health references and even insurance companies to determine if someone's at increased risk for disease or to identify obesity. But relying solely on BMI can be problematic, especially for South Asians. Both Dr. Yajnik and Dr. Yudkin have the same BMI, but have vastly, and are actually healthy by Western medicine standards. But the crucial difference is their body fat percentage. Dr. Yajnik, the South Asian, has a body fat percentage that is more than twice that of Dr. Yudkin, the European. Everyone is familiar with the modern middle-aged uncles and aunties with the thin arms, the chicken legs, and the disproportionately large pot belly. This is actually me 10 years ago, before I had any gray hair. This is actually the thin fat phenotype, which is especially prevalent in the South Asian community, and I'm actually a perfect example of this. But it's not all my fault. And why is this? What's the connection? It's thought that South Asians adapted to the severe famines by having a tendency to store fat and have low lean muscle mass. And this actually shows up in many other ways. For instance, we burn much less calories than others with the same height and weight. How do we know there's a connection between the historic famines and modern disease? Studies on descendants of famine survivors show an increased risk for disease. The Great Irish Famine from 1845 to 1852 is actually a well-known example tied to the British colonial empire. There was a dramatic increase in diabetes-related deaths starting 30 years after the famine, continuing into subsequent generations. The great research on survivors of the Great Chinese Famine and the Swedish overcalyx famine from the 1800s show the severe effects of prolonged starvation. Research on these famines shows that surviving even one famine alters the expression of disease, doubling the risk of diabetes, high blood sugar, and heart disease in the modern era, including affecting even the grandchildren, even if they've never endured a famine. I know this is a lot of information to digest, but I wish before my heart attack that someone had given me a simple checklist. That's why I'm going to give that to you right now. Do you fall asleep after a meal? That could be a sign of prediabetes or diabetes. Do you feel sleepy during the daytime or snore at night? You could be at risk for prediabetes, diabetes, and heart disease due to sleep apnea. Do you have dark patches on your face, neck, arms, or legs? That could indicate prediabetes or diabetes, and it's called acanthosis nigricans. Do you get short of breath when you're climbing the stairs? You could have heart disease. When you look down, do you see your belly and not your feet? This could be a sign of obesity, and it's a gateway to a myriad of other diseases. By the way, if you said yes to any of these questions, be aware and keep watch. This could save your life. Having said all that, do we have to accept our scary fate? No. We can thrive. We can still thrive. What you see now is a much healthier person you see today. After my heart attack, I looked deep into the mirror and I decided I needed to see my future, not my belly. This means being proactive and optimizing your health. It means a new normal for South Asian health. And this means prevention, working with your healthcare provider. Start earlier than you think. Get blood tests and also health checkups early. Get your cholesterol checked. And by the way, if you are checking for diabetes, know that a simple blood test may not be enough. You may need to get an oral glucose tolerance test. Because of altered fat metabolism, South Asians have an increased levels of cholesterol and other blood fat levels. Get those checked as well. Know that 40% of cardiovascular disease risk in South Asians is due to the elevation of 3 factors: lipoprotein small a, C-reactive protein, and homocysteine. Get those checked. Monitor your blood pressure early and frequently. Know that less than 120/80 is normal. Know that high blood pressure is a risk factor for chronic kidney disease, stroke, and heart disease. Calculate your 10-year coronary risk score and have it adjusted for South Asians. Maintain your BMI less than 23. South Asian males should aim for a waist circumference of less than 90 centimeters, and South Asian females for a waist circumference of less than 80 centimeters. Let's move on to lifestyle choices. Maintain a healthy, nutritious diet, which means cutting down on white rice and trying other ancient grains such as millets. Exercise frequently. Know that South Asians actually need at least 232 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week to maintain health. Strive for that. Get adequate amounts of quality sleep and make sure you actively reduce and manage your stress levels. Know that you have control over your health. The new South Asian normal is not just an individual focus, but a collective effort. When you look into the mirror, you should not only see your history, but also your future. We, all of us can heal from a traumatic past with awareness and knowledge. It is my mission to save all the uncles and aunties and all of you, one belly at a time. Thank you.